A billionaire sitting on the steps of her RV holding a leaking garden hose like it's the last thing tethering her to the planet. Across the lot, a single dad is flipping half a slice of bread on a camping stove pretending it's dinner. Neither of them knows that today their stories are about to collide. If quiet stories like this make you pause, breathe, maybe even believe in people a little more, consider hitting like or subscribing. No pressure, just a way to tell me you're someone who loves stories where kindness still matters. All right, let's begin. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were desperate. A crooked sign stood by the side of Highway 41. Most of its letters had peeled off, leaving behind a faded rest area 0.3 miles. The wooden post leaned dangerously to the left as if it was tired of standing guard for travelers who never came. Caleb gripped the steering wheel tighter. His old blue pickup rattled as it crawled up the final slope. The fuel gauge had been flirting with empty for the last 20 miles. Now it wasn't flirting anymore. The warning light blinked steady, urgent. Beside him in the passenger seat, Maya's legs were tucked up to her chest. Her little sneakers were pressed against the torn leather seat. She wasn't looking at the road. She was staring out the side window, tracing imaginary lines on the glass with her fingertip. "Dad, are we gonna make it?" Her voice was soft, not scared, not yet. Caleb shot her a quick glance, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We'll make it to somewhere," he said. The truck coughed twice, shuddered, then stumbled forward as if by sheer stubbornness. A patch of cracked asphalt came into view, the so-called rest stop. There wasn't much. A wooden picnic table splintered and leaning sideways. A single trash bin half collapsed. One lonely water spigot stood near the edge, crooked like the sign. But that wasn't what caught Caleb's attention. On the far side of the lot, perfectly parked as if it had been dropped from the sky, was a white RV. Big, modern, clean. Too clean for a place like this. Its tinted windows reflected the dull gray sky like black mirrors. Caleb instinctively pulled the truck to the opposite end of the lot. Not too close, not too far. He didn't want to bother anyone, didn't want anyone bothering them either. The engine let out one last tired sigh, then died. Silence. Nothing but the whisper of wind dragging dust across the concrete. Caleb sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, knuckles pale. His shoulders sagged. He didn't sigh. Out here, sighing felt like a luxury. Then came the voice again. "Dad, I'm hungry." This time firmer, less sleepy, more certain. Caleb nodded slowly, unbuckled his seatbelt. "I know, kiddo. Let's see what the pantry's got left." He pushed open the truck door. Dry air rushed in, hot, sharp, filled with the smell of dust and something metallic. The kind of smell that told you how far you were from anywhere. From the corner of his eye, He noticed a small movement behind the RV's tinted window. Someone was in there watching, or maybe just looking, but for now he had other things to worry about. Caleb walked around to the back of the truck, opened the rusty tailgate. Inside, beneath a pile of blankets and worn-out tools, sat an old red cooler, his so-called pantry. Time to make dinner out of whatever was left. The cooler creaked as Caleb popped the lid open. Inside, not much. Half a loaf of bread squeezed flat from being wedged under a toolbox. One jar of peanut butter, the cheap kind with the faded label curling at the edges. And a plastic bag with 2 lonely apples. One of them bruised on one side like it had lost a fight with something heavier. That was it. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, exhaled through his nose. Well, looks like we're having a feast tonight, he muttered. Maya leaned in beside him, balancing on tiptoe, her nose wrinkled. Is that all? He pulled out the bread, checked the slices. A few were cracked along the edges. One had a suspicious spot that he quickly peeled off and tossed aside, hoping she didn't notice. Maya noticed. She always noticed, but she didn't say anything. Bread and peanut butter, Caleb said, forcing a grin. Classic road trip cuisine. Maya tipped her head, pretending to consider. Do we have jelly? Caleb opened the side pouch of the cooler. Dug around, nothing. Not even a packet from some long-forgotten diner stop. He shook his head. Afraid not. Gourmet's closed today. Maya giggled. Not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when your dad is trying his best. Caleb grabbed the small foldable stove from under the toolbox. The metal legs wobbled as he set it up on the crooked picnic table. The gas canister was half full, probably. Maybe. As he worked, Maya sat cross-legged on the bench, fingers tracing circles into the dusty tabletop. Her eyes drifted again toward the white RV. Quiet, still. No movement now. Dad, she asked softly, do you think people like them ever eat like this? Caleb glanced up, followed her gaze. His eyes rested on the RV for a long second. He smiled, dry but gentle. No, kiddo, I don't think they do. Maya nodded but didn't look away. I think they probably just push a button and food shows up. Caleb chuckled. Yeah, something like that. The wind stirred. A napkin fluttered across the concrete, tumbled end over end like a paper tumbleweed. Caleb clicked the lighter, trying to coax the stove to life. Flames sputtered. The tiny blue fire caught. Dinner was coming together. Kind of. From the outside, the RV looked like something out of a catalog. Sleek, shiny, impossibly clean against the dust-stained horizon. It didn't belong here. It barely belonged anywhere except a luxury resort campground or maybe the pages of a glossy travel magazine. Inside, however, it was a different kind of silent. Vivian sat by the window, half hidden behind the edge of a velvet curtain. Her elbows rested on the marble-finished table, fingers loosely holding a ceramic mug that had long since gone cold. She hadn't touched the coffee. She wasn't sure she even remembered making it. On the laptop in front of her, numbers blinked in red. Portfolio losses, margin calls, unpaid invoices stacked in her inbox like tombstones. Every headline was another reminder. Vivian Sloane's empire collapses amid fraud scandal. Fraud. She hadn't stolen. She hadn't cheated. She just hadn't seen it coming. The assistant's betrayal. The partner selling her out. The board that turned their backs the second the numbers dipped. All those years building something out of nothing. And now, a pile of nothing again. The RV was hers because it was the last thing no one had managed to take. No creditors had claimed it. Not yet. Not the bank, not the lawyers, not even the vultures pretending to be friends. Vivian curled her fingers tighter around the mug, stared through the tinted glass, not really watching, but not fully looking away either. Then movement. A man, early 40s maybe, worn denim jacket, hands rough, shoulders set like someone who carried more than just physical weight. He was kneeling beside a battered pickup, rummaging through an old cooler. And the girl, 8, 9 maybe. Brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, knees pulled to her chest, sneakers swinging beneath the edge of the table, her eyes locked onto the peanut butter jar like it was some kind of treasure. Vivian blinked, looked away. This wasn't her problem. She had her own storm to survive. Yet even as her gaze dropped back to the laptop, her fingers didn't return to the keys. Her thumb just traced the rim of the mug over and over, like a nervous habit. Outside, the man coaxed a tiny stove into life. Blue flame wavered against the breeze. Inside, the espresso machine's light blinked quietly in the corner. Waiting. Offering. Vivian didn't move. She wasn't ready. Or maybe she'd been still so long that moving felt like forgetting how. Through the curtain's narrow gap, her eyes drifted back, just for a second, to the small figure of the girl watching her dad, smiling at something he said, something tightened in Vivian's chest, not sharp, not painful, just heavy. She looked away, let the curtain fall, but not fully, not yet. The flame sputtered but held. Caleb crouched low beside the crooked picnic table, carefully balancing the small pan on the shaky, foldable stove. His hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that only comes from practice. Not from choice, but from necessity. He scooped a spoonful of peanut butter, dropped it onto a slice of bread, and pressed another slice on top. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't much, but it was dinner. High cuisine, he muttered under his breath. Table for two. Maya sat on the bench, legs swinging beneath the warped wooden planks. She picked at a splinter near the edge, watching her dad work like it was both a magic show and a comedy act. Dad, do you think the bread's supposed to be this crunchy? She asked, tapping a corner of it. It's artisan, Caleb replied, straight-faced. Rustic, handcrafted, aged to perfection in the back of a 2004 pickup truck. Maya giggled. It was the kind of laugh that kids do when they know something isn't quite right. But it feels safer to pretend it is. He added the bruised apple, sliced carefully to hide the worst parts, onto a paper plate. 2 halves for her, 1 for him. A gust of wind tugged at the napkins. Caleb reached out, pinned them down with a smooth stone that sat conveniently on the corner of the table. It worked, sort of. Above them, the sky was shifting. The clouds had thickened. The horizon looked heavier than it should for this time of day. Caleb noticed but said nothing. "We should open a restaurant," Maya suggested between bites, swinging her legs harder. "Call it Bread and Stuff." Caleb smirked. "Bread and stuff, huh? Sounds upscale." She nodded seriously. "Yeah, the menu would be bread and stuff." He pretended to think about it. "You might be onto something." For a moment, the emptiness around them felt less empty. Just 2 people. A dad, a daughter, a meal cobbled together with whatever life hadn't taken yet. As he spread the last bit of peanut butter onto his own slice, Caleb's eyes drifted back, unintentionally, toward the white RV. Still there, still quiet, behind the tinted window something flickered, a silhouette, a shape, the woman, maybe watching, maybe just looking. He didn't know why. But the sight made him press the sandwich halves together a little tighter, as if to say, this is enough. Even if it wasn't. Inside the RV, the silence was different. Not the peaceful kind, not the comforting kind. It was the heavy, suffocating kind that settles in when there's nowhere left to run. Vivian sat stiff at the small built-in dining table, laptop open, screen glowing harsh against the soft, polished interior. Her inbox was a battlefield. Bold red subject lines lined up like bullets. Final notice, payment overdue. Account frozen, immediate action required. Eviction process initiated. Cabin property, Bear Creek. Her eyes moved from line to line, but the words didn't blur anymore. They were sharp now, almost cruel in their clarity. The cabin. God. The last thing that felt remotely like home, and now it was going too. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. For a second she considered replying, some excuse, some hollow promise. But what would be the point? The money was gone, the partnerships were gone, the company gone long before anyone bothered to send her the memo. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark parts of the screen, pale, drawn, unfamiliar. There was a time when that face was framed on the covers of Forbes, Tech Weekly, and a half-dozen other magazines. Self-made visionary. Billion-dollar brain. The queen of clean energy. Now, a footnote. Her thumb absently rubbed the chipped handle of her coffee mug, the same one she'd carried for years. White ceramic with faded gold letters that barely spelled out "Stay Wild." The espresso machine blinked quietly in the background, waiting, offering. She ignored it. Through the edge of the curtain, her eyes flicked back toward the parking lot. The man, still kneeling by that battered stove, the girl, sitting cross-legged, grinning at something he'd said. They were making sandwiches. Simple, messy, imperfect. Something twisted in her chest. Not pity, not quite envy, something else. Something quieter. For all the private jets and penthouses and boardrooms she'd once called normal, she realized she'd never seen anyone make dinner like that. With hands, with care, with intention. Vivian squeezed her eyes shut, tried to breathe through it, tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had sat across from her at a meal and asked, "How was your day?" without wanting something in return. The inbox dinged again, another message, another nail in the coffin. She didn't open it, didn't delete it either. Instead, she reached across the table, flipped the laptop shut, and let her fingers rest on the cool, silent surface. Her gaze drifted back to the window. She didn't move the curtain fully aside, but she didn't close it either. The sandwich was gone faster than it should have been. 2 slices of dry bread barely held together by a stingy swipe of peanut butter. It wasn't enough. Not really. But Maya made it enough. She always did. Still. When she wiped the last smudge from her fingers onto the corner of her jeans, that familiar ache whispered back. The kind that started in her stomach but didn't really come from hunger. She tried not to show it. Caleb sat across from her, elbows on the table, pretending to fiddle with the lighter like it needed fixing. But she knew what he was really doing, stretching the moment, pretending the meal had lasted longer than it did. Maya pulled her knees up to her chest, arms wrapped around them, chin resting on top. Her gaze drifted, not on purpose, but not by accident either. Her eyes landed on the RV again. It was like staring at a spaceship, big, shiny, mysterious, perfect in the way that things far away from you always seem to be. She wondered, what was it like inside? Did it smell like cinnamon, or maybe coffee? Was it warm? Were there blankets that didn't have holes, chairs that didn't wobble, floors that didn't creak every time you shifted your weight? Was there more bread? Her fingers absently traced the rough edge of the picnic table. Her sneaker scuffed against the concrete, rhythmically tapping like it was keeping time for a song only she could hear. "Dad," she asked quietly, Do you think people in there ever run out of food?" Caleb followed her gaze, then shook his head gently. "Nah, kiddo. I doubt it." She nodded, slow, thought about that, chewed on it the way she had chewed the crusts a few minutes ago, trying to make something small feel bigger. Her chin pressed tighter into her knees. Her thumb played with the fraying seam on her sneaker. Across the lot, the RV stayed still, silent, but it wasn't just a thing anymore, not just a shape. She could see someone now, a shadow, a figure just behind the curtain. Not watching exactly, but there. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, Maya didn't look away, not yet. The wind had shifted. The sky, once a dull stretch of pale gray, now wore streaks of gold fading into deeper blues. Evening was folding itself quietly over the horizon. Caleb was busy rinsing their plastic utensils at the barely functional water spigot. His back was turned just long enough for Maya to quietly slide off the bench, dust her hands on her jeans, and start walking toward the RV. She didn't run. Running would have made it feel sneaky. This was just walking. Totally normal. Nothing wrong with walking. Her boots crunched softly against the gravel. With every step closer, the RV seemed even bigger, taller. The smooth white panels reflected the last bits of sunlight like a wall of polished glass. When she reached the door, Maya hesitated. Hands tucked behind her back, she rocked a little on her heels, staring at the silver handle that looked fancier than anything they owned. A breath in, a breath out, then 3 quick knocks. Not loud, not timid either. For a second, nothing happened. Just the whisper of wind pulling at the corners of her jacket. Then, the soft hiss of pressurized air. The door clicked. Slowly, cautiously, it edged open just a crack. And there she was, Vivian, barefoot, wearing a gray sweater that hung looser than it should, sleeves pushed halfway up. Her hair wasn't perfect like it used to be in those magazine photos. Strands had slipped free, framing her face in soft, uneven lines. Her eyes, sharp but tired, landed on the small figure standing at her doorstep. Maya tilted her head, hands still behind her back. "Hi," she said, voice small but steady. Do you maybe have a slice of bread or anything?" Vivian blinked. For a second, words didn't come. They were somewhere, stuck between surprise and something else she hadn't felt in a long time. You need bread?" Her voice sounded rusty. Maya nodded quickly. "Yeah, just, you know, we kinda ran out. It's okay if not. I was just checking." Vivian's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the door. Her instinct said no. Not because she was cruel, but because that's what survival teaches you. Close the door, stay small, stay safe. But when she looked down, really looked, at the kid in front of her, something in her chest did that strange tightening again. Maya wasn't begging, wasn't desperate. She was hoping, simply, bravely. Vivian let out a breath, quiet, heavy, then nodded. "Hang on." The door hissed wider. Vivian disappeared inside. Maya stood there, rocking gently on her heels again. A nervous kind of patience. Her eyes wandered, past the doorway, into the shadows of the RV's interior. Warm lights, cushioned seats, a little plant sitting on the countertop like it belonged there, a place that felt safe. The door opened again. Vivian handed her 2 slices of bread wrapped in a paper towel. No words, just hands meeting halfway. "Thanks," Maya whispered. I'll bring back the towel." Vivian almost smiled. Almost. No rush. The door clicked softly as it sealed shut behind Vivian. For a moment she just stood there. One hand rested against the kitchen counter, the other hovering near the pantry door. Her mind raced faster than her hands did, torn between instinct and something else. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the script. She was the one who vanished, the one who locked the world out. And now, a kid. A kid had walked right up to her door like it was the most normal thing in the world, asking for something as simple and as impossibly hard as bread. Vivian opened the pantry. It was organized, meticulous, almost too neat. The only part of her life still under control: artisan crackers, imported jams, vacuum-sealed pasta, a box of sourdough rolls she'd forgotten she even had. Her fingers hovered. Then, maybe for the first time in weeks, they moved without overthinking. She grabbed the bag of rolls, 6 of them, still soft. She hesitated, stared at the bag. It felt too much, or maybe not enough. Her thumb brushed the plastic like it was trying to decide if generosity was still a muscle she remembered how to use. With a small sigh, the kind that feels heavier coming out than going in, she turned toward the door. It hissed open again. Maya was still there, hands clasped behind her back, feet slightly pigeon-toed, looking up like someone half expecting the door to slam shut after a mistake. But it didn't. Vivian extended the bag toward her. Not just a slice, not just one, a whole bag, 6. "Here," she said, voice softer now. "This should last a little longer." Maya's eyes widened. Not greedy, not shocked, just grateful in the most sincere, uncomplicated way possible. "For real?" she asked, hugging the bag against her chest like treasure. Vivian's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "For real?" For a second, neither of them moved. The air between them wasn't awkward, just new, a space that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. Then Maya tilted her head, peeking past Vivian's elbow into the RV. Is it like super cool in there?" Vivian followed her gaze, glanced back at the plush seats, the polished cabinets, the espresso machine blinking quietly in the corner. "Depends who you ask," she answered, half laughing before she could stop herself. From across the lot, Caleb's voice floated through the wind. "Maya, where'd you wander off to?" Maya spun. "Got bread!" she called back, lifting the bag overhead like a trophy. "The nice lady had some!" Vivian watched her run, watched the small figure cross the gravel, boots thudding, bag swinging. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't close the door right away. Caleb wiped his hands on the back of his jeans, glancing up just in time to catch the sight of Maya jogging back across the cracked lot. She was holding something. No, swinging it. A bag. A full bag. From the shape of it, bread rolls. His brows pulled together. He straightened up, instinctively scanning. Not the bag, but where she'd come from. The RV, the side door was still open, wide enough to see the silhouette standing in it. A woman. Her, the owner, the stranger. For a brief second, something in Caleb's chest tightened. Not fear, not quite. More like that cautious pressure life installs in you after enough years of things going sideways. His hands reflexively rested on his hips. A protective stance. Maya slowed as she reached him, breathless but grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Look," she beamed. "She gave us a whole bag. Not just a slice, Dad, a whole bag." Caleb crouched slightly to her eye level. His gaze scanned her face first. No fear, no upset. Then the bag. Still sealed, fresh enough. And then back toward the RV. The woman hadn't moved. Or maybe she had. It was hard to tell from this distance. But the door, still open. He pressed his lips together. A dozen questions lined up in his head. Who was she? Why help? What did she want in return? If anything, people didn't just hand out kindness for free. Not out here, not anywhere really. But then, Maya. Maya's smile was still there, wide, honest, a kind of trust only kids knew how to give. Trust that hadn't yet been taught how dangerous the world could be. He swallowed, looked down at the bag, then back at the RV. For a split second he debated marching over, not angry, just protective. The way any dad would, just to look, just to check, but he didn't. His hands slowly dropped from his hips. Instead, he reached out, ruffled Maya's hair. Messy already, but it didn't matter. "Well," he said, keeping his voice even, steady. "Looks like you did good, kid." She nodded, still clutching the bag to her chest like it was made of gold. "Told ya, she's nice." Caleb chuckled under his breath, not quite convinced, but not ready to shut it down either. "Yeah, maybe." He glanced toward the RV one last time. The door was still open, but the figure had stepped back. Not fully out of view, but not hiding either. For reasons he couldn't name, Caleb didn't look away right away. But he didn't wave, didn't approach, just let it be. For now. The rolls were a little stale, but to Maya they tasted like a feast. Caleb tore one in half, handed the bigger piece to her without thinking. She didn't notice, or maybe she pretended not to. Either way, it was their rhythm. Sitting at that splintered picnic table, knees brushing, the world shrank down to simple things. Warm bread, the hum of wind, the clink of a plastic knife cutting through a slice of apple. Not bad, Caleb said, chewing thoughtfully. 5-star dining. Maya grinned, mouth half full. Yeah, maybe 6 stars. Caleb glanced up. The clouds were heavier now, swollen, bruised. The sun dipped low, sending stripes of copper and deep violet bleeding across the sky. But it wasn't dark yet, not quite. There was still this tiny window of peace before the world changed again. Maya carefully balanced her piece of apple on top of the roll like she was crafting a tiny sandwich. "Do you think the lady in the RV eats stuff like this?" she asked. Caleb smiled at that. A tired, lopsided thing. "I doubt it, kid. Pretty sure she's got an oven in there bigger than our van." "Yeah," Maya nodded, thinking. "Bet her bread isn't crunchy." A soft laugh escaped him before he could stop it. "Bet you're right." For a moment, neither of them said much. Just the steady rhythm of chewing, the quiet scrape of napkins sliding across weathered wood. The kind of silence that only feels heavy if you let it. Caleb leaned back slightly, eyes drifting toward the RV again. Still there, still quiet. The door had finally closed, but the faint glow of light spilled from one narrow window. Warm, golden. He wondered what her story was. What kind of person parks a luxury RV out in the middle of nowhere looking like they've got everywhere to be, and no one waiting for them? Maya swung her legs beneath the bench, scuffing her boots against the concrete. She leaned her head sideways, resting it on Caleb's arm without asking. He didn't flinch, didn't. Just let it happen. "Dad," she murmured, voice softer now. "Do you think this is what family is? Like, just sitting and eating, even if it's nothing fancy?" Caleb swallowed. His eyes stayed on the horizon, but his hand found the top of her head, fingers brushing through her tangled hair. "Yeah, kid," he answered, voice lower than before. "Yeah, I think it is." The wind stirred. Gentle, but there was a bite to it now. A taste of something coming. Something moving fast. Neither of them noticed it yet. Not fully. For now it was just bread and apples and the soft, shared quiet of two people holding each other's world together with nothing but patience and stubbornness. The RV was quiet, not in the way big empty places are, but in the way someone's heart gets quiet when there's nothing left to argue with. Vivian sat sideways on the bench seat by the window, one leg folded beneath her, mug in hand. Still half full, still cold. She hadn't bothered reheating it. Her eyes flicked toward the narrow window. She hadn't meant to look, hadn't meant to check again, but there they were. The father, the girl, sitting at that crooked picnic table, sharing bread. Not just eating, talking, laughing. She could hear nothing from this distance, but somehow the silence between them felt louder than most conversations she'd ever had in boardrooms, on stages, in those empty glass-walled meetings. Filled with polite weapons, Vivian shifted slightly, pulling the curtain just a fraction wider. The little girl was balancing an apple slice on top of her bread, grinning like she'd just invented something Michelin chefs hadn't thought of yet. The man, her father, leaned back, smiling in that slow, exhausted way people do when they've had to make too many things, stretch too far for too long. Vivian's fingers curled around her mug, tight, then loosened. She'd spent years learning how not to care about what wasn't her problem. That was how you survived in her world, how you built a billion-dollar empire, how you didn't drown. But right now, staring through that thin slice of glass at two people surviving on what looked like half a dinner and double the love, something in her didn't feel armored anymore. Her gaze softened without her permission. She wondered, when was the last time someone leaned their head on her shoulder? When was the last time she made a meal not because it was scheduled or catered or delivered, but because someone was hungry and she could feed them? The thought made her chest ache. The wind shifted, tapping the corner of the RV. A low hum carried through. Not loud, not urgent, but different. She didn't notice it yet, not fully. Her eyes stayed on them. The man cutting the smallest piece of apple and pretending it was normal. The girl leaning into his arm like it was the safest place in the world. For the briefest moment, Vivian wondered if she was the one on the outside looking in. Or if maybe they were the ones who still had something that money had never been able to buy. Her fingers brushed the edge of the curtain again. Not to close it. Not this time. Just to remind herself that it was there. And that for once, she didn't want it shut. It started with the wind. Not a breeze, not playful. This was different, sharper. The kind that carries weight before the storm even arrives. Caleb felt it first, the way the air shifted. How dust started curling at the edges of the lot. Tiny whirlwinds danced around his boots, then scattered like they knew what was coming. He glanced toward the horizon. The sky wasn't just gray now. It was heavy, swollen, a thick brown line pressed against the far edge where land met sky, rising, growing. He knew that look. He'd seen it before. Dust storm, fast, ugly. Hey, kiddo. His voice stayed even, but his hands moved faster. Gathering the scraps of dinner, shoving napkins into the plastic bag, folding their tiny world back into something portable. Time to pack it in. Something's coming. Maya blinked, still mid-swing with her legs. Huh? Then followed his gaze. Her smile faded just a little. Is that? Yeah. Dust storm. Caleb stood, scanning the lot, calculating fast. The van was close, but was it sealed tight enough? Not really. Not for this. Inside the RV, a low beep echoed. Vivian's head snapped toward the control panel above the kitchen window. A red light flashed. Warning. High wind advisory. Her tablet, still resting on the counter, buzzed with a push notification. Severe weather alert, dust storm warning until 9 o'clock p.m., visibility near zero, avoid travel. She muttered under her breath, stepping to the window. Pulled the curtain back fully now. The sky looked wrong. An enormous wall of earth-colored wind was pushing toward them, devouring everything in its path. Trees disappeared into it. Signs vanished. The distant hills blurred into nothing. Vivian's fingers flew over the controls, retracting the awning, locking the stabilizers, securing the roof vents. Her heart thudded harder than she liked to admit. She hadn't planned on this. Nobody plans on this. Back outside, Caleb yanked open the van door. Maya, inside. Now! But she glanced at the RV. Is the lady okay? Caleb paused. His hands tightened around the strap of the cooler. He glanced over. The RV's interior lights were glowing brighter now against the darkening sky. A figure, the woman, moving fast inside, preparing. She's fine, he said, more for himself than for Maya. She'll be fine. We've got to move. But even as he said it, his eyes stayed there, longer than he meant to. The wind punched through again, harder this time. Loose gravel skipped like marbles across the lot. A plastic cup cartwheeled past them, spinning wildly before slamming into the fence. Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she double-checked the door seals. Her eyes flicked back toward the picnic table, empty now. But the image of them, the father, the daughter, was still fresh. For one sharp, breathless second, she wondered, were they going to be okay? The wind hit like a shove. Caleb yanked the folding stove shut, the hinges screaming in protest. The cooler slid across the cracked concrete as a blast of dust punched through the lot. Maya, get in the van, now! His voice wasn't sharp. It was firm, the kind of tone dads use when it's not a suggestion anymore. Maya froze for half a second, her eyes wide as the first sheets of dust swept past them, making the edges of the world dissolve. Then she moved. Boots thudding against the gravel, she scrambled toward the van, yanking the side door open with both hands. Inside, the air smelled like old fabric and engine grease, but it was safety. She dove onto the back seat, hugging her knees to her chest. Caleb wasn't far behind. He shoved the cooler in, followed by the folding chair, the tarp, anything that wasn't bolted down. Dust bit at his face, his eyes squinted against it. Another gust hit harder. The van rocked. The old suspension groaned. Caleb slammed the side door shut, coughing. His hand shot to the dashboard, turning the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. For a split second, he considered pulling out, driving, but to where? Visibility was dropping by the second. The highway was gone, swallowed by a curtain of swirling brown. "Buckle up!" he snapped, twisting in his seat to check Maya. Her small hands fumbled with the seatbelt, clicking it in place just as another wave of wind made the van shudder. Inside the RV, Vivian moved like muscle memory had taken over. Fingers flipping switches, awning in, stabilizers down, vents sealed, everything locked but her eyes. Her eyes weren't on the control panel anymore. They were on the van. She could barely see it now, just the faint outline of metal half disappearing into the storm. Her stomach clenched. That thing wasn't built for this. Her hand hovered over the door latch. Logic screamed, "Stay inside! Stay safe! You don't owe them anything!" But her feet moved anyway. She grabbed the emergency lantern, flicked it on, and stepped toward the door, pausing only to yank her jacket off the hook. Another gust slammed into the RV. The walls creaked but held. She braced herself, hand on the latch, her breath caught. Her reflection stared back from the window, messy hair, tired eyes, someone she barely recognized anymore, but someone who couldn't just sit and do nothing. Not this time. The key turned. The engine coughed once, twice. Then nothing. A hollow grind, a choking stutter, silence. Caleb gripped the wheel tighter, his jaw locked. His thumb hit the key again, harder this time. As if more pressure would change anything. The van coughed, sputtered, but it didn't catch. Outside, the storm roared louder. Dust scraped across the windshield like sandpaper. The horizon had vanished completely. The world shrank to the inside of this van and the noise trying to eat it. "Dad?" Maya's voice was small now. Not scared yet. Not quite. But it was curling around the edges of fear. Why isn't it starting? Come on, Caleb muttered through clenched teeth. His hands worked the key again. Nothing. Just that ugly, grinding sound. The mechanical equivalent of a death rattle. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He'd babied this van for years, held it together with duct tape, borrowed parts, and pure stubbornness. But even stubbornness has limits. His fingers tightened. His foot tapped the gas pedal, tried the key again. Again. Nothing. Maya's breath hitched. "Dad?" He snapped his head back toward her, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his teeth. "It's okay. It's just being fussy. Just give me a second." Another gust slammed into the van. The frame groaned. Dust poured through the tiny gap near the weather stripping. Caleb's mind raced. Could they outrun it on foot? No, not with Maya. Not in this. He could barely see past the hood. His hands hit the wheel. His knuckles went white. One more try. He turned the key. Nothing. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Dead. Dead. Inside the RV, Vivian flinched as the wind slammed another wave of dust against the side panel. Her hands hovered over the door latch. Her eyes locked on the van's silhouette, now flickering, dim, struggling behind the wall of dirt. She could see it, the blink of hazard lights, the way it rocked unevenly, and the way the engine never caught. Her stomach twisted, hard. "They're stuck," she muttered. The words tasted bitter. They're stuck. Logic screamed again. This wasn't her problem. This wasn't her mess. She had nothing to do with these people. And yet, Vivian shoved her jacket on, flicked the lantern on, tightened the zipper until it bit her chin. Her fingers hovered one last time over the door latch. A deep breath, sharp, heavy, then click. The door hissed open. Dust punched into the space, whipping her hair sideways. Her boots hit the gravel hard. She was moving before she could change her mind, straight toward the van, toward the noise, toward the kind of trouble money never teaches you how to solve. Vivian fought against the wind, each step heavier than the last. Dust clawed at her face, her hair whipped sideways, the lantern in her hand, swinging wildly. The van was barely visible now. Just a ghost shape against a wall of brown. She stumbled to the driver's side, slammed her palm against the window. Knock, knock, knock. Hard, fast, sharp enough to punch through the howling storm. Inside, Caleb jolted. His hands had been frozen on the key mid-turn. Like if he just willed it harder, the engine would come back to life, but no, then the knock. His eyes snapped left, and there, a face half covered by a scarf, hair wild, eyes narrowed against the sting of dust. Vivian, she motioned. A quick universal signal, thumb over her shoulder. Come, now! Caleb blinked. His body wanted to hesitate. The father in him, the one trained to trust no one, rely on no one, flared up. But the storm roared louder. The van shuddered. Another blast hit so hard that the frame leaned sideways. Maya whimpered, not crying, not yet, but holding her knees so tight her knuckles went pale. Dad! Vivian slapped the window again, sharper this time. Then yelled, not that either of them could hear it. Move! Come! Now! Her free hand pointed back toward the RV. Its lights glowing faint but steady through the chaos. Like a lighthouse, Caleb's fingers hovered. His instinct screamed, don't trust strangers. His brain screamed, there's no choice. He twisted, yanked the door open. The wind hit like a wall. Dust poured in. Maya gasped, ducking her head into her hoodie. Come on! Caleb snapped, unbuckling her fast. Grab your bag, move! Maya scrambled forward, coughing, blinking through tears that were mostly dust. Caleb snatched the cooler without thinking, muscle memory, then thought better of it. Dropped it. No time. Vivian didn't wait. She grabbed Maya's free hand, locking her fingers tight around the girl's wrist. Stay close, don't let go. She barked over the wind. Maya squeezed back without hesitation. Caleb slammed the van door behind them, already half running. His boots skidded on the gravel, nearly losing footing as the ground itself seemed to tilt beneath the pressure of the storm. Vivian led the way, cutting sideways against the wind. The RV loomed ahead. Solid, unmoving, defying the chaos. 3 steps, 5, 10, almost there. Then, her hand shot to the door handle, yanked, slammed it open. Warmth, light, safety. In, she ordered. No room for debate. Maya scrambled in first. Caleb ducked in right behind her, his hand never leaving his daughter's shoulder until both were fully inside. Vivian shoved the door closed with both hands, locking it down. The seals hissed. The wind muffled. Silence. Not perfect silence, but the kind that feels like breathing again. Vivian pressed her back to the door, chest rising and falling. Her eyes flicked between the man, the girl, and for a strange, long moment, nobody said a thing. The RV groaned against the wind, but it stood solid. Inside, the storm was nothing but a muffled roar, distant, like waves crashing against someone else's shore. Caleb sat nearest the door, one hand still clamped on Maya's shoulder. His breathing was heavy, sharp, like his body hadn't realized yet that they were safe. Maya stayed close, her arms curled tight around her knees. But her eyes were already wandering, taking in everything. The RV was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Smooth white walls, glossy cabinets, soft leather seats. A kitchen so clean it looked unused, and near the corner, a fluffy, wiry mutt with one ear flopped sideways, watching them with curious brown eyes. Maya blinked. "Is that a dog?" Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. Vivian glanced over, wiping dust from her cheeks with the sleeve of her jacket. "Yeah," she exhaled, dropping her scarf onto the counter. "Radar. He came with the RV. Sort of." As if knowing his name was part of the deal, Radar padded over. Not wagging, not barking, just inspecting. A sniff at Caleb's boots, another at Maya's hand. Maya slowly uncurled her fingers, offering them palm up. Radar sniffed. Then, satisfied, flopped down beside her like he'd known her forever. For the first time since the sky turned dark, Maya smiled. Just a little, but real. Caleb finally let out a long, uneven breath, sat back against the wall. His fingers dragged through his hair, leaving a streak of dust behind. "Thanks," he managed. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "For the door." Vivian leaned against the edge of the kitchen counter. Her arms crossed, but her posture softer now, less rigid. "Yeah," she answered. "Well, wasn't gonna leave you out there." Radar yawned. The storm howled again, rattling something on the roof, but inside, here the air felt different, still tense, but no longer dangerous. No one spoke for a while, just the quiet hum of the RV systems, the occasional creak when the wind shoved against the walls. Vivian broke it first, stepped over to a cabinet, pulled out 3 mugs, held one up. "Coffee? Tea? Or just hot water?" Caleb blinked, like the question itself was a foreign language. "Hot water sounds great." His voice softened. "For her, too." He nodded toward Maya. Maya tilted her head. "Do dogs drink tea?" Vivian's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Radar? Nah. He runs on stolen toast and bad decisions." For the first time, the tiniest ripple of laughter flickered through the space, small, quick. But it was there. Outside, the storm still raged, But in here, the wind wasn't winning anymore. The RV's heater hummed softly, steam curled from the mugs in their hands. Radar stretched out near the bench seat, his head resting on Maya's shoe like it belonged there. For a moment it felt still, then a flicker, a burst of static. The small TV mounted above the dining nook blinked to life. Neither Vivian nor Caleb had touched it. A background system reboot, maybe. Or maybe it was just stubborn tech refusing to stay quiet. Maya perked up first. "Oh, TV works in here?" Vivian grimaced. Didn't think it did anymore. Her hand half reached toward the remote, but the screen was already glowing. A local news channel. Breaking developments this morning. The anchor's voice was flat, practiced. In the ongoing collapse of Brookstone Ventures, the former CEO, Vivian Cross, remains unreachable amid reports of bankruptcy filings, shareholder lawsuits, and federal investigations into fraud and misappropriation of funds. Caleb's head snapped toward the screen. His eyes didn't move, not even when Maya glanced up at him. On the screen, a photo. Her photo. Vivian. Clean. Polished. Hair perfectly in place, that corporate armor kind of smile, the one people wear when they've convinced the world they're untouchable. But here she was in a dust-streaked hoodie, barefoot, pouring hot water into a chipped mug. Vivian froze, completely still. Her hand hovered midair, mug half poured. Like her brain hadn't decided whether to pretend it wasn't happening or just own it. The news clip rolled B-roll footage. Her standing on a conference stage. Her shaking hands with investors. Her stepping out of a black car, surrounded by cameras. Maya blinked between the screen and the real person sitting 3 feet away. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. "Wait, that's you!" Vivian set the kettle down. The clang of ceramic on steel was louder than it should have been. She didn't answer, not directly, just pulled the scarf off her neck fully now, ran both hands into her hair like she could maybe untangle herself from the moment. Caleb's eyes didn't leave her. His jaw was tight. His hands rested on his knees, but his fingers curled. Slow, deliberate. The anchor's voice droned on, legal analysts speculating, shots of corporate headquarters with the windows dark, angry investors pacing outside Vivian's side, a tired, hollow sound. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's me. Or it was." Silence. Not heavy yet. Not angry. Just processing. Maya blinked again. "But you live in an RV now." Vivian let out something between a laugh and a breath. "Yeah, I do." She crossed her arms tighter now. "Turns out the road doesn't care who you were, just whether you've got gas money." Radar lifted his head. Looked at Caleb, then at her, then sighed like even the dog understood the tension hanging there. Caleb didn't speak. Not yet. His gaze was steady, weighing. watching, trying to figure out if he should still be thankful for that open door. The TV crackled once, then fizzled back to static, mercifully. No more headlines, no more reminders, but the silence it left behind felt heavier, more honest. Vivian stood there, arms crossed, back slightly hunched. Not defensive, not proud either. Just waiting for the look, the judgment, the question everyone asked when they recognized her. How does someone like you lose everything? But it didn't come. Instead, Caleb stood, wordless, moved toward the kitchenette like a man whose hands needed something to do before his mouth decided to speak. He opened the bread box, pulled out a half loaf of sandwich bread Vivian had probably forgotten was there, checked it. Still good. Your toaster work? His voice was calm, maybe too calm. Vivian blinked. What? The toaster. He pointed at the corner. Looks like one of those fancy ones. Yeah, it works. Her words stumbled a bit, like her brain wasn't sure how to compute that response. Caleb slid 2 slices in, pressed the lever. The soft mechanical thunk of it dropping felt louder than the storm now muffled outside. Radar thumped his tail. Maya sat cross-legged on the couch, hugging a pillow, eyes flicking between the 2 grown-ups like she was watching a tennis match in slow motion. Vivian shifted, unfolded, sat down on the edge of the bench seat, fingers laced together, elbows on knees. I didn't run because of the lawsuits, she said quietly, or the press, or the bankruptcy. That was just noise. Caleb didn't interrupt, just opened a cabinet, found peanut butter, a butter knife. I ran because... Vivian's fingers tightened. I spent 15 years convincing everyone, myself included, that I was somebody. That if I built the tallest tower, signed the biggest deals, I'd matter. That it would fix something. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the dust storm blurred the world. And then one day I realized the tower wasn't real. Not really. Not when the foundation's just air. The toaster clicked. Up popped 2 slices, unevenly toasted, one side darker than the other. Caleb didn't flinch, didn't comment. He spread peanut butter in slow, careful strokes, the kind of motion that said, this is what matters right now, not the past, not headlines, just making sure someone eats. Maya scooted closer, quiet, listening. Vivian rubbed her palms together. You probably think I'm reckless, irresponsible, a fraud. Caleb slid a plate across the table, set the toast down. Lady, he said softly, I think it's just a bad day. Vivian blinked once, twice, her mouth opened, closed, then, against her own permission, a tiny laugh slipped out. Rough, cracked, but real. Yeah, she whispered. Yeah, maybe that's all it is. Radar laid his head down again. The wind howled, but inside something shifted, not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. The storm had started to soften. You could hear it. The wind wasn't screaming anymore, it was just breathing heavy. Inside the RV, the heater hummed, the lights dimmed low, radar snored, his paws twitching like he was chasing something in his dreams, and on the small pull-out couch near the window, Maya slept, completely surrendered to exhaustion. One arm flopped over her stuffed bear. Her chest rose and fell in that slow, steady rhythm kids seem to have when the world finally feels safe enough to let go. Caleb stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of warm water, not drinking it, just holding it. Vivian leaned against the counter not more than 2 feet away, arms crossed, shoulders loose now, not tense like before. For a while, neither said anything, just watched the tiny swirl of steam curl from Caleb's mug, watched the soft flicker of the lantern glow against the RV walls. It wasn't an awkward silence, not anymore, just full. You ever? Caleb's voice was low, careful. You ever look at your life and think, this ain't the story I thought I was telling? Vivian let out a breath, half a laugh. Every day. She shifted her weight, thumb tracing the edge of the counter. When I was 20, I thought success was jets, offices with views, people remembering my name in rooms I'd never walked into. Her eyes flicked toward Maya, soft now. But turns out none of that's what sticks. Caleb nodded, slow. His thumb tapped the side of the mug. Yeah, I thought I was building something solid once, a family, a future. You think it's gonna last right up until the day. He stopped, jaw tightened, looked down, until it doesn't. Vivian didn't press, didn't ask. She didn't need to. Some things are clearer in the spaces where words don't fit. I lost her, Caleb finally said, quiet, like the words weighed more than they should. Maya's mom, cancer, fast, unfair. Vivian's eyes softened, her arms loosened, almost without her noticing. I'm sorry. Yeah. His mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not exactly. Me too. The wind sighed against the walls. Vivian's fingers traced the rim of her own mug. You know, when the storm hit earlier, I almost didn't open that door. Caleb tilted his head, not surprised, just listening. I kept thinking it's not my problem. I don't have to get involved. I don't owe anyone anything. Her voice dipped lower. But then I saw her, Maya, and I thought maybe. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Caleb didn't move, just stared into the swirl of his drink. Then, quiet, steady. Yeah, I get that. A long pause. Comfortable now. You make a mean peanut butter toast, Vivian said softly. Caleb chuckled. For real this time. Yeah, it's pretty much my specialty. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone in the quiet. The wind had faded into something sooner now, more like a tired sigh than a threat. The storm was moving on. Out the narrow window, the clouds were breaking. A strip of pale blue slid between the dusty gray, like the sky was remembering how to breathe again. Vivian rinsed 2 mugs at the tiny RV sink. Caleb stood nearby, rolling his sleeves up. Quiet, comfortable, like neither of them wanted to break the stillness, but both understood it wouldn't last forever. His gaze drifted toward the RV's dashboard. The left side panel was hanging loose, one corner held up by duct tape that had definitely seen better days. A small bundle of wires peeked out from beneath, frayed at the edges. "You know," Caleb said, wiping his hands on the back of his jeans, "this thing's not gonna hold much longer if that wiring stays like that." Vivian followed his eyes. Her mouth pulled sideways, part grimace, part resigned grin. "Yeah, it's on the list right after figure out what to do with the rest of my life." Caleb huffed a laugh. "Fair." He stepped closer, crouching a little to get a better look. "But if you've got a screwdriver and maybe half a roll of luck, I could probably patch it up. At least until the next storm tries to tear it off." Vivian blinked, straightened. "Seriously?" "Yeah." He shrugged. "It's what I do. Used to be a mechanic. Back before, well, before the road became home." For a second, a real second, her face softened. Not the cautious soft she'd worn all night. Not the guarded maybe I can trust you version. No. This was something else. A tiny reluctant smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. The kind that slips out when you forget to hold it back. That'd be kind of amazing, actually. Her arms crossed, but it wasn't defense anymore. More like grounding. "I think the last guy who worked on this thing tightened every screw except the ones that actually mattered." Caleb chuckled, pushing a stray wire back into place with his thumb. "Yeah, they do that. Mechanics are either magicians or con artists." Vivian leaned on the counter, watching him work. "And which one were you?" He looked up, briefly, a glint in his eye. "Depends who you ask." Radar perked his head up from the floor, as if even he caught the shift in tone. Lighter, easier. Maya, still asleep, stirred slightly but didn't wake. Vivian exhaled, a long breath that seemed to leave her lighter than when it came in. "You know, for a guy who showed up with a dead van and no dinner, you're surprisingly useful." Caleb grinned. "Don't spread it around. People might start expecting things." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Vivian laughed. Not the brittle, polite kind. A real one. Small, quiet, but real. Outside, the first golden light of morning slid across the desert floor. Something new, something waiting. The soft light of morning was creeping in. Gold streaked across the dusty windows, catching on every fingerprint and scratch like tiny stars scattered across the glass. Radar stretched, shook once, then settled back down, his job as storm sentinel officially done. On the couch, Maya stirred, a slow, sleepy squirm beneath her blanket. One arm flopped up, batting at nothing. Then a small voice, half mumbled, half dreaming, floated out. "Hey, we could plant a tree." Caleb paused mid-turn of the screwdriver, looked over. "Hmm?" Maya didn't open her eyes, still somewhere between dreaming and waking. "Right there, out front, a big one. So next time someone stops, they've got shade." Her words stretched, softened by sleep. "Maybe a swing, maybe just a place to wait." Vivian blinked, slowly. Her hand, which had been resting on the counter, shifted, fingers curling slightly. "A tree, huh?" Caleb's voice dropped, gentle. "Kinda dry out here for trees, kiddo." Maya's head burrowed deeper into the pillow. "Nah, not now, but someday. If you wait long enough, stuff grows." Silence. Not awkward, not heavy, just full. Vivian's eyes stayed on the floor, or maybe not really the floor, more like some point just past it. Something she hadn't dared think about in weeks. Months. A tree, something permanent, something rooted. Her jaw tightened, not in resistance, but in that way a person does when something hits too close to the bone. Caleb stood slowly, quiet, walked over, draped the fraying corner of the blanket over Maya's shoulder, tucking her in like muscle memory, like something he's done 1,000 times before without thinking. "You know," he said softly, glancing toward Vivian. "Kid's not wrong." Vivian exhaled, the smallest shake in her breath. "Yeah," she murmured. "Yeah, maybe not." Her fingers tapped an absent rhythm against the countertop. "Never thought about planting anything before, not in a long time." Caleb nodded. "Storm like that kinda makes you wonder what's worth sticking around for." Vivian didn't answer, not right away. Her gaze drifted toward the window, toward the empty patch of dirt where Maya's imaginary tree now lived. And in her mind, for the briefest flicker she saw it. Not a real tree yet, just the idea of one, a shadow of what could be. Roots that didn't exist, branches that hadn't grown but possible. For the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like enough. A tree that isn't there yet, but maybe someday. The storm was gone, left behind only damp patches of dirt, the faint smell of wet sage, an air that felt lighter. Morning sun slid over the horizon, stretching long beams of gold across the gravel lot. Birds were starting to remember how to sing again. Vivian knelt by the side of her RV, brow furrowed. wrestling with the stubborn water valve that had been leaking since Arizona, maybe longer. Her fingers were slick with dust and frustration. Then a shadow fell across her. "You're gonna strip it like that," Caleb said, crouching beside her. His tone wasn't teasing, just matter-of-fact, gentle, the way someone talks when they've already decided not to let it become a fight. Vivian didn't look at him. "I've been stripping it since Utah," she grumbled. "Yeah, I can tell." He reached for the wrench in her hand. Their fingers brushed, a tiny collision neither of them commented on. Then he twisted the handle with a firm, practiced grip. Click, snap, a sharp metallic sound. The leak stopped. "Seriously?" Vivian blinked. "That's it?" Caleb sat back on his heels. "Yeah, sometimes it's just knowing which way to turn." Silence, but not the heavy kind. Just space, room. Neither of them said it. Neither said anything about the night before, the headlines, the storm, the accidental confessions. It all hung there, unspoken, like a jacket someone forgot to grab on their way out. Vivian wiped her hands on her jeans. "Guess I should have figured that out myself." Caleb shrugged. "Guess." Then, after a pause, "But it's easier when someone's holding the other end of the wrench." Radar padded over, sniffed the now dry valve, then flopped into a warm patch of sun like, "Yep, problem solved." From inside, Maya's voice floated out, sleepy, bright. "Is there breakfast?" Caleb chuckled. "Kids got priorities." Vivian pushed herself up, brushing dirt off her palms. "Yeah, smart ones." They both stood there for a beat longer than necessary, watching the horizon, watching something neither of them knew how to name yet. The RV's side panel creaked in the wind. Caleb tapped it with his knuckle. "That's still loose. I can fix that before we go." Vivian glanced sideways, not surprised, not smiling exactly. But something softened at the edges. "Yeah, I'd like that." No one said out loud what both were thinking. No one asked if "before we go" meant before you go or before I do. But somehow it didn't matter. Not right now. Right now was just fixing what you can. Maya sat cross-legged in the dirt, tongue poking out the corner of her mouth, fully absorbed in her work. Her little hands clutched a stubby blue marker, the kind that barely worked but somehow still left just enough color to matter. In her lap was a smooth, flat stone, rounded at the edges, cleaned off earlier when she'd carefully rinsed it under the RV's hose. Her version of prepping a canvas. Vivian stood nearby, arms crossed, watching, not interrupting, just letting it happen. Her face softened in a way that didn't happen often. Caleb tightened the last bolt on the RV's side panel, wiped his hands on a rag, then wandered over. "What's she up to?" Vivian tilted her chin toward the ground. "Art, obviously." Maya didn't look up. "It's not just art," she corrected, her voice full of the kind of focus only an 8-year-old can summon. It's important. Her marker scratched against the rock. A wobbly 5-pointed star, bright blue ringed with tiny dots that might have been meant to be sparkles or just mistakes she decided to keep. Caleb crouched, elbows on his knees. Looks pretty good to me. Maya nodded firmly. It's for here. She glanced up at Vivian. So you remember someone stopped. Someone was here. Her small fingers traced the edges. When the wind blows or when you feel lonely, you can look at it. And remember, not everyone drives past. For a second. A real, full second. Vivian's throat tightened so suddenly it almost startled her. She pressed her palm against her sternum like she could physically flatten the feeling back down. Kid, she started, but her voice caught. Maya stood, brushing dirt from her knees. She walked over to the edge of the RV's front step, crouched, carefully, placed the painted stone just under the lip of the door, tucked it between two patches of gravel where the rain wouldn't wash it away. There. She patted it twice like sealing a deal. Now it won't get lost. Radar patted over, sniffed it once, then wagged his tail like, yeah, approved. Vivian knelt beside the girl, her hands hovered, not sure whether to ruffle Maya's hair or pull her into a hug or just hold still. She settled for brushing a thumb over the top of the stone. It's beautiful, Vivian said quietly. Her voice didn't sound like hers. It sounded softer, less steel. Thank you, Maya grinned. It's a star, for your ground, so when you forget to look up, you can look down instead. Caleb stood, hands on his hips, looking at the two of them. That, he said, voice steady, might be the smartest thing anyone said all morning. Vivian didn't disagree, not even a little. The morning was stretching itself wide open now. No more storm clouds, just that quiet kind of sunlight that feels like a fresh start. The kind that doesn't make promises, but maybe hints at one. Caleb finished tying down the last bungee cord on the back of the van. His hands moved slow, not because the job needed time, but because sometimes leaving feels heavier than arriving. Vivian stood by the RV's open door. Her fingers traced the edge of the frame like she wasn't quite sure whether to lean on it or let go of it altogether. So, she started, paused, tried again. You two heading anywhere in particular? Caleb glanced over, wiping his hands on the rag. Not really. Wherever the gas holds out, I guess. Maya peeked out from behind him, grinning. Somewhere with pancakes. Vivian chuckled. Real, low, easy. Then her voice dipped a little. More careful now. There's this place, Bear Creek, little mountain town about 2 hours from here. Her thumb rubbed the edge of her jeans pocket. I used to have, well, I still technically have a cabin up there. Small. Needs work. Caleb's brow lifted. Yeah? Yeah. She shifted her weight like the words tasted strange in her mouth. I was thinking about selling it. Been thinking about it for months, but I don't know. A breath. Maybe it's not ready to be done with me yet. She met his gaze, held it longer this time. Not defensive, not guarded, just open. You're pretty good with busted things, she said, voice soft but steady. Cabin's got plenty of busted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Even radar seemed to pick up on the stillness. Sitting quietly, tail flicking against the gravel in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Caleb looked down, kicked at a loose rock near his boot, then up again. You offering a job? Vivian's mouth tugged sideways. Offering something. Her arms crossed. Not tight, just thoughtful. Help fixing it up. Stay for a bit. No strings, no expectations, unless you want there to be. Maya's eyes widened. Like a real house? Her hands clutched the straps of her backpack. With a door and maybe a tree swing? Vivian laughed under her breath. Yeah, maybe even that. Caleb didn't answer right away. He turned, looking out over the highway, that endless stretch of cracked asphalt heading anywhere, or nowhere. But somehow the road to Bear Creek didn't feel like nowhere. Not today. He exhaled, slow, steady, a nod. Yeah, I think we could do that. Vivian smiled, small, quiet, but this time not uncertain. The kind of smile that means maybe the road just turned. The van door creaked shut. The RV's awning caught a breath of wind and fluttered once, like waving goodbye or maybe hello. The little painted stone, the one with the crooked blue star, sat right where Maya had placed it. A tiny promise pressed into the earth. A reminder that someone was here. Someone stayed. Vivian stood at the step, watching Caleb and Maya climb into the old van. But this time they weren't driving away, just driving together. She smiled. Not the polite kind, not the practiced kind, the kind that feels like remembering how. As the van pulled onto the gravel road, Maya leaned out the window and shouted back, "Don't forget the tree!" Vivian laughed, shaking her head. Her fingers brushed the edge of the doorframe, then drifted down to the small patch of dirt just beside the step. She crouched, dug her fingers into the warm, dry earth, and planted the first seed, a tree that isn't there yet, but maybe one day. If stories like this make your heart feel just a little bit quieter, a little bit fuller, consider liking or subscribing. No pressure. Just a small way of saying you're someone who still believes in good things. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.